Alright, today's lesson is lesson 9-8, day 1, completing the square. Our objectives for today are to find the value of c that will create a perfect square trinomial and to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. Okay, these are perfect squares. You don't have to necessarily have this sheet in order to do these notes, but I just want you to keep this idea in mind. We've used this sheet many times. And I want you to understand these are our perfect squares here, and the form for the perfect square trinomial is a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. In the event that this is a plus sign here, both of my parentheses are going to have plus signs. In the event that this is a minus sign here, both of my parentheses, my final answer, are going to have a minus sign. And I'm going to write my answer as a plus b squared or a minus b squared based on the sign inside the parentheses. So before you write down number 1, I want you to go ahead and write this quadratic equation here. F of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And then the formula for finding c is going to be c equals, in parentheses, b over 2, close parentheses, squared. So I need to write both of those things down before you write down the problem. Number 1 is x squared plus 6x plus blank. So in completing this square, what we're doing is we're looking for the c. We're looking for the c that will form a perfect square trinomial. In order to do that, we are just going to plug into this formula here for c. So we're going to say c is equal to whatever my b is. My a is 1, because there's an understood 1 in front of my x squared. My b is 6, because it's the number in front of the x. And my c at this point in time is unknown. So I'm going to solve for it. I'm going to say 6 divided by 2, because my b is 6, squared. And then I'm just going to type this into my calculator. I'm going to say 6 divided by 2 equals 3 squared. 3 times 3 gives me 9. So my c, therefore, is 9. Now, I'm going to put this into the correct form, and I'm going to do what we did before where we factor it out. So we have x squared plus 6x plus 9, and we're going to factor that out. 9 is the perfect square of 3 times 3. X squared is the perfect square of x times x, and the rule is that this is equal to 2 times one of my first and one of my last. So there. 2 times 3 is 6. Times x is 6x. So I'm going to bring down, put in my parentheses, my x's and my 3's. And because there is a plus sign here, it means there's a plus sign in each, which makes my answer x plus 3 squared. Make sure that you have all of that down before you move on. All right, go ahead and get down number 2. It is x squared minus 10x plus blank. So again, we're going to use this formula. C equals b over 2 in parentheses squared. And then I'm going to list my a, which is 1, my b, which is 10, and my c, which is unknown as of this moment. So we're going to plug into that formula. My b is 10, so that's going to be 10 divided by 2 squared. 10 divided by 2 gives me 5. 5 squared is 25. So that means that c equals 25. So I'm going to plug that back into my blank. Go ahead and write it right there. And then I'm going to factor this quadratic. So x squared minus 10x plus 25. My x squared breaks down to x times x, and my 25 breaks down to 5 times 5. And I know, because this is a perfect square, that my middle term is going to check out. 2 times x times 5 does equal 10x. So I'm going to bring this down and put it in parentheses. I have x and x 5, and 5, and my sign right here is minus. So there's going to be a negative in each set of parentheses, so I'm going to write that as x minus 5 squared. Make sure that you have all of that down before you move on. So now we have shown you how to find the value of c that will create a perfect square trinomial. And now we're going to look at solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Now go ahead and write down number 4. It's 1x squared plus 14x equals 15. So again, I want you to keep in mind ax squared plus bx plus c. F of x equals. And then I want you to keep in mind that c is equal to b divided by 2 squared. Alright, so here, this just looks like what we should be doing is subtracting the 15 and bringing it all over here to get it in this form, but that's not the case because this 15, if we bring this over here and make it c, is not going to be a perfect square trinomial, and that's what we're looking for, is the perfect square. So, what we're going to do is we're going to bring this down. We're going to say 1x squared plus 14x plus blank equals 15. So we're going to fill in this blank just like we have in all the other ones. So our a equals 1 and our b equals 14, so our c equals what? It equals 14 over 2 squared. 14 over 2 gives us 7. 7 squared gives us 49. So we're going to bring that 49 and we're going to put it over here in the blank. But because we're adding it to this side, there's a little catch here. We have to add it also to this side. So that gives us x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 15 plus 49 is going to give us 64. So now we have to factor this side just like we have all the others. We're going to say x times x, and we know that 49 is the perfect square of 7 times 7. We're going to bring that down and put it in our parentheses, and based on this sign right here, it's going to be a plus sign in the middle, so we're going to have x plus 7, x plus 7, and we're going to write that as x plus 7 squared, and then we can't forget that that is equal to 64. So that's going to be your final answer. Make sure that you have all of that down before you move on. And I'm sorry, I'm sure you noticed I numbered that as number 4 and it should have been number 3. So I'm sorry, you can leave it as number 4, change it to number 3. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we're not yet done with this problem. We have one more step here. So we found the c like we have in all the other problems that we've done today. The next step is that we are going to have to actually solve it. So just like we did yesterday when we looked at something being squared and we realized that the square root, taking the square root of that is the opposite of squaring. It's the inverse operation. It's going to undo it. That's what we're going to do here. So we're going to take the square root of x plus 7 squared, which is going to give us x plus 7. And then on the other side, we're going to take plus or minus the square root of 64 because we did it on this side, so we have to do it on that side as well. And again, we're using the plus or minus in front of the square root sign here to say that whatever the square root of that is, it is going to be either positive or negative, and it's still going to give us the same answer. So the square root of 64 is 8. So we have x plus 7 equals plus or minus 8. So we can write that as x plus 7 equals positive 8, and x plus 7 equals negative 8. And now we're going to subtract 7 on both sides in each equation. So this is going to give us x equals 1 and x equals negative 15. So here in my brackets, I'm going to say negative 15, comma, 1. And that is going to be my final answer. On this first one of this type, I want to show you the check. I want you to copy down the check, and then we won't make you check on the rest of them. So here's our check. First of all, with the check, keep in mind we're coming back to the original problem. The original problem. All right, so we're going back to the original problem to check, and we're going to plug in everywhere we see an x. We're going to plug in each of these numbers. So the first time, we're going to say negative 15 squared plus 14 times 15 equals, 14 times negative 15 equals 15. Negative 15 squared is going to give us 225. 14 times negative 15 is going to give us negative 210. And then we still have equals 15. 225 minus 210 is going to give us positive 15, and that does equal 15. So that one checks out. Then we're going to come back to the original problem again, and we're going to plug in our 1 for x. So we're going to say 1 squared plus 14 times 1 equals 15. 1 squared is 1 plus 14 times 1. 14 times 1 is 14 equals 15. 1 plus 14 is 15. 15 equals 15. So that one checks out as well. So make sure that you have all of the work and the check written down before you move on. It's finally the end of the problem this time, I promise.
All right, go ahead and write down number 4. Number 4 says t squared minus 12t equals negative 20. So again here I want to do a completing the square in order to solve. So I want to make this first part, or this part on the left, into a perfect square trinomial. Now I went ahead and put a 1 in front of the t squared. I need to go ahead and figure out what c I need to put in to make this a perfect square over here on the left. So I'm going to say t squared minus 12t plus blank equals negative 20 plus blank. Because again, if I add a c to the left-hand side, I can do that, but I have to also add it to the right-hand side. So here, to find my c, I'm going to take my b and divide by 2 and square it, because that's my formula for finding my perfect square for c. My b here is negative 12, so I'm going to say negative 12 divided by 2 squared. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6, and negative 6 squared is 36. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. And I got that 36 by saying negative 12 divided by 2 was negative 6. Negative 6 squared was the 36. So now I'm going to factor what's over here on the left into t, because the t squared splits up into t, and 36 splits up into 6 and 6. So t, and I'm going to look at this sign right here, this very first one. So t minus 6 squared equals, so I factored what was on the left into t minus 6 squared using my perfect square trinomial that I made. Then in my calculator, I'm going to say negative 20 plus 36, and that's going to give me 16. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to have 16. After we've gotten to this step, so we found the c value that we need. We've added it to those sides, and we've factored the left-hand side. Now we can just go, it goes back to what we were doing yesterday. In order to get rid of this squared, because we need this t right here by itself, so to get rid of the squared, the opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. And we know that anytime we take the square root, we have to have the positive and negative version of that square. So here the square and the square root are going to cancel, so I'm left with t minus 6 equals plus or minus, and the square root of 16 is 4. So now I'm going to split this up and say t minus 6 equals negative 4, and t minus 6 equals a positive 4. Now I'm going to solve each one of these separately by adding 6. And here t is going to equal 2. I add 6 here, t is going to equal 10. So I have two answers here. My two answers are 2 and 10. Okay. And what we're doing here is we're still finding those zeros. So if I were to graph this, it would cross the x-axis at 2 and 10. This is just a different way of finding those zeros or solutions. Again, we're not going to check this one for time's sake, so go ahead and make sure you have all of the work written for this one before you move on. All right, go ahead and write down number 5. You have 2n squared minus 8n equals 4. Now, the deal with completing the square is the fact that I need that my a value needs to be 1. So this front number here needs to be a 1, and it's not. It's a 2. So I want to make that front number a 1. So to do that, I'm going to take the 2, and I'm going to divide everything in here by 2. It's going to cancel here, and I end up with n squared minus 4n equals 2. Now it looks exactly like the other problems that I've done, but you have to make sure with the method of completing the square that that a is a 1. So now I'm going to go through and find my perfect c, or the c for my perfect square. So I'm going to say plus blank equals 2 plus blank. So I need that perfect c value, and again, if I put it in on one side of the equation, I have to also put it in on the other. So to find c, that's b divided by 2 squared, and here my b is negative 4. So I'm going to put a negative 4 in here. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add a 4 to both sides. Okay. Now I'm going to factor my perfect square, and I know it's a perfect square because I'm the one that made it into a perfect square. So my n squared is going to split up into n and n. My 4 is going to split up into 2 and 2. So I'm going to factor it into n, and I'm going to look at this sign right here, minus 2 squared equals 2 plus 4 is 6. So I factored the left, and I added what was on the right. Now again, we need to solve for that n, meaning we need to get that n by itself. So to do that, I need to get rid of the squared. So to get rid of the squared, I'm going to take the square root of both sides, again making sure I do the positive and negative version. The squared and the square root here are going to cancel. And I'm left with n minus 2 equals positive and negative. Now the thing is, the square root of 6 is not, or 6 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to leave that as the square root of 6, because that's going to be a decimal, so I'm going to have to round here in just a minute. Now I need to move that 2, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Or if you wanted to, you could go ahead and split this up into 2, since that's what we've been doing. And we're going to say n minus 2 equals negative square root of 6, and n minus 2 equals positive square root of 6. We're going to add our 2 to both sides here. We get n equals 2 minus the square root of 6. So then I'm going to take my calculator, and I'm going to say 2 minus, and then I'm going to do square root of 6, and that's going to give me negative 4.9, and a lot of other places. We went around this to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to say that it's negative 0.45, because that 9 is going to round that 4 right there to a 5. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to add my 2, and n is going to be 2 plus square root of 6. So again, I'm going to take my calculator and say 2 plus the square root of 6. And again, it's going to give me a big long decimal because 6 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to round it to the hundredth. So I'm going to say 4.45, because again, that 9 is going to round that 4 right there to a 5. Okay, so in my squigglies, or my braces, I'm going to say negative 0.45 and 4.45 as being my final answers. Just make sure you have all of that work down before you move on. Alright, so we should now be able to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. Go ahead and write down your assignment at the top of your paper. Okay, when you're finished writing down your assignment, that is the end of your video. Thank you for watching.